The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian, Miss Berlin, Mr. Betcher for Bringing Down Security.
Hello.
We're coming to you live during a day of the week. I don't want to mention which day of the week because I don't know if of the weekend or weekday, so my employer is not listening and will know. But we are recording during the day, which is something we don't normally do, which is because of the need, the story and the subject will come up very shortly here, and we'll talk about that. But Miss Berlin, Mr. Betcher, hope you had a great week. Hope our guest has had a great week. We'll bring her on here in a second. But how's your day been going? Full of meetings? Yeah.
Full of meetings.
Oh,
Yeah.
I really do meetings.
Yeah. Oh, that must be
Kind of
nice.
busy, yeah.
What's it like over there in Perfect Town where you live? Mayor of Perfectville or something?
I've
Yeah.
been troubleshooting Office 365 logs for the last couple hours. So
Ew.
yeah.
Do you have an
That
E5
sucks.
license? Do you have an E5
I
license?
have yes, I have one, which is really all you need to turn on the good logging.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah. The government wishes that they'd been able to turn on good logging with SolarWinds, but yeah, apparently they didn't have E5 licensing. I heard that on Risky Business the other day.
You only need one.
Well, okay, that's fair. That's fair. I was listening to Risky Business, and apparently they have to spend another $150 million for E5 licensing to be able to get access to things like forensic logs and stuff, which is painful. So yeah.
You just need it for one user. It doesn't cost that much money. It's like a
That's
loophole.
good.
It's a logging loophole.
Yeah, but which user are we going to give it to?
Doesn't matter. Turns on
The president.
Yeah,
Bob from
but
accounting.
you can give it to any user you want, and it turns on the right logging for everybody.
Okay. Wow, that's good to know. So maybe the CISA head up in the White House will get
Great.
his
The
E5
cat's out of the bag.
What?
Damn it.
Wait, what? I missed something. Oh,
No, you're not.
Okay.
You're supposed to keep that a secret.
Oh, are we?
Oh,
No.
okay.
Well, nobody tell anybody.
Yeah.
How are they going to make money otherwise? Anyway, so we have a short amount of time here, and we have a lot to go through. Which our guest here is. She's awesome. That I words fail me. I talk good. I real talk good. I know how to say things that are impressive. She's just awesome. I've followed her for years on Twitter, and she jumped at the chance to come on when I said, "Hey, why don't you join us?" She's here representing herself. She's not a lawyer. She's not our lawyer. As I've been heard a lot of times from other lawyers. Elizabeth Warden, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah,
All
exciting. Long time listener, first time guest. So I'm trying not to nerd out too much with excitement.
Don't lie. Everybody says that, but don't lie. You don't. Nobody listens to this show. It's just us three talking, and yeah, no. Yeah, that's what I expect. I don't expect my mama to ever come on and go, I remember hearing that episode. No, she would never say those things. So.
It's all hype.
See, that's why I've learned quickly that I made mistakes in allowing my mother to know what my social media profiles are and stuff, because she will comment on Instagram, LinkedIn. Yeah. She's a very good cheerleader though. So she'll listen.
Yes.
Right on. Okay. Well, hi, Elizabeth's mom. How you doing?
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Right on. So for those folks who don't know you, please tell them a little about yourself and how you came to be where you're at today.
So if you've followed me on Twitter, apologies in advance. I'm under the handle Lawyer Liz, and practicing attorney for almost 20 years now, and fell into cybersecurity, technology, law backwards. Knew some nefarious researchers, hackers who were doing some fun things, and basically realized that once they knew a lawyer, they were going to pepper me with questions, and that what they were doing was much more fun than anything else I was doing in business. And so it kind of got sucked in and haven't looked back, but work on the technology policy as well. And currently chief of staff over at Scythe, but prior stints have included being the senior assistant city attorney for the city of Atlanta. A mouthful to say that I was in charge of technology projects and policy for the Atlanta airport, but had the distinction of being one of the only people in City Hall, especially in the law department, on March 22nd, 2018, and who understood both ransomware and exactly what was happening. So that got to be fun.
Fantastic. Yeah. Some of the pre-discussion here, we were talking about, she was talking about how she was almost successfully setting up a ransomware campaign. And I was like, wow, okay, that's not your typical lawyer and stuff. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Just I know we have a disclaimer before the podcast, but from a legal point of view, do not take her, what we talk about is legal advice. Always reach out to your own people who are designed and purchased, and work for your company to, reach out and seek any legal advice that might be there. I just wanted to.
Which is also a good reminder that if you don't already have both a business type lawyer as well as a criminal lawyer that you are friends with or have some sort of connection, contact, or whatever, especially from the research side, your company's lawyer is not your lawyer.
That's right. Just like HR. HR is not there to help you. They're there to protect the company. That's right. So anyway. All right. So the reason we're having Elizabeth on today is to talk about a couple things. One is the new executive order signed by President Biden it was in response to the Colonial Pipeline stuff. And if you've heard or read or listened to the Colonial Pipeline issue, and some of this might be because of SolarWinds as well, because there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened back at the beginning of this year where there was a supply chain attack and everybody in the government uses SolarWinds, and it was a bad thing. And so what we had Elizabeth come on talk about, and she's going to have an upcoming blog post on this, is what the executive order means for government potentially, and what does that mean for maybe companies, because some of the things inside this EO is going to be directly impacting some very big companies and some companies that create things like IoT. So I think we should start at the beginning, because a lot of Americans and probably a lot of non-US Americans here ask about what an executive order is. And it's not a law, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. Give us a definition there if you could.
And without going into too much of the nerdy aspects of it, think of it as it's so declareth the White House, and remembering that we have the three branches of government. So, with the executive branch, it's issue an order. And in this case, while it doesn't carry the same weight as something that Congress has passed from the legislative side, and this is where it gets fun, because you read it on the surface, and this executive order really is focusing on the federal government, because that's all it can do. It's basically power through the purse and saying, hey, if we're going to spend money on these things, then you need to meet these minimums or these requirements. And dear agencies, please establish these requirements, these standards. But where it gets fun is when you think about the fact that a lot of the state and local governments have essentially said, gosh, contracting and vetting vendors and qualifications and standards for stuff is really difficult. But who has the budget and the experience? And it's like the federal government has done this. So what if we take our contract purchasing, basically procurement steps? What if we say, hey, if you've met the standards, or if you've gotten onto a government purchasing, if you're on one of those schedules, then you can skip all that process with us. You don't have to jump through our hoops. So you have so while it sounds like this starts at the federal level and stays at the federal level, and it's just government contractors, when you start realizing that, well, all these state and local municipalities, and it gets to be interesting when we're talking about ransomware or other incidents, not like Colonial Pipeline, but you think of the city of Atlanta or Baltimore, the school district, the Baltimore, different police departments, all these folks who are going through cybersecurity incidents are now going to be purchasing new contracts, new services, and they're going to start looking at whatever these are. So while it's an executive order, it's not, so it's coming from the executive branch, and on the surface seems like, it's just, it's government contracting standards, but ripple effect to every company that is a subcontractor, that if you're doing business, if federal funds are involved, then pay attention to this one.
Right.
Which really trickles down, because like I think of the one time I did a government contract, right, which I was a contractor for somebody who was also a subcontractor for somebody else who was a subcontractor for like a 3-letter agency, and that's a huge chain of companies and people and processes and everything.
Yep. Yeah. When I worked in the gov space back in around the turn of the century, there was DITSCAP and DIACAP, and and then FedRAMP is something else that I've also unfortunately dipped my toe in, which is painful because they have different levels of how you can operate in different environments in the government. So if you're like FedRAMP high versus FedRAMP low, you can only be in certain environments. And of course, it only behooves you to be in the high one because everybody wants you to be in the high one. So there's a lot going on here. And they definitely called out the director of FedRAMP in some of this discussion here. So Liz, what are some of the highlights? I don't want to go through. I mean, it's a very, very, it doesn't look like it's a very long document, but there's definitely different sections. What I wanted to do is maybe, go over some of the highlights of this. I put a couple of things in the show notes that we can either discuss or not. If you had specific things that were going to be in your blog post, I don't want to ruin the whole blog post for everybody, but if you've got a couple things you'd like to discuss, we can do that. I want there to be some surprises and for them to go to your blog because it's
right. Well, and don't worry, at 30 pages, it is a very dense 30 pages. I mean, I ran out of ink marking it up of, this is interesting. This is interesting. I mean, there are 11 sections. A lot of it gets bogged down in the definitions, but really some of the highlights and where you're going to see people kind of cheering and kind of circling back, comments that the Atlantic Council had a couple of their folks go through and mark it up and kind of add their comments. And I thought it was neat. Nick Anderson pointed out, he says, okay, great. You've mentioned OT right at the beginning, but that was it. That was the one. So you see a lot of stuff where you're kind of going, oh my gosh, you're so close. Yes, this is all. Oh. And then we backed away. But then you have, so high level, it's a push to improve the nation's cybersecurity. So it's been in the works for a while, and it was pushed up for release about a week early because of Colonial Pipeline. And you'll see some themes from SolarWinds pop in. It's got a kind of 4 key things that I like to talk about, or it brings in, or the impact would be cost, clarity, consensus, and cybersecurity. But what it's doing is setting up a big portion of it is, I'd say of the 8,000 words, 2,000 of them approximately deal with supply chain and SBOM. So the software bill of materials. And I think y'all have had previous episodes, Alan Friedman on talking about it. So shameless plug for those of us who do pay attention to their prior episodes, go find them because Alan does a great job. And we were joking, I'm completely picturing Alan like putting on the war paint, going, because he's one of the ones, the SBOM, you've got to get some of this within 60 days. and you think of, okay, this is a department or a group that has 2 staff members, I believe. So
Right.
2 staff members are going to have to come up with these standards, and it's building up. You also have intel sharing where you're encouraging different intelligence. You're like, great, okay. But what are we sharing? Where's the liability? Where's the risk? If I share this, but yet my marketing department has an entire campaign built around me making a lot of money by dropping some of our insights and stuff in a big report or quarterly reports, like, no, you've got to share it now.
Right.
And it talks about contract provisions where you're requiring different standards and common language. And where I think that's going to be fun. And I'd love to have popcorn at the ready and sit there kind of Statler and Waldorf style, is you're going to put a bunch of government and big business lawyers in a room together and say, okay, agree on contract language. No, good luck with that. Have fun. Because it's going to be interesting of going, well, yeah, we've just found 3 different ways to say the same thing. Sure, yours is better. Well, good. Like, no, it's not going to be. And then, it's going to be fun. But then you also have some of the other highlights that you're going to have. You think of like the medical review boards or the NTSB after a plane accident. You're going to have, okay, there's been a breach. There's been an incident. Now let's pick it apart. Like, okay. And some of it's disclosure reporting. And also, you're trying to think, all right, within 3 days of an incident, it's got to be reported. Okay, 3 days from an incident where you're still not even sure exactly what's going on, who do you call? It's building on, and with the intel sharing, having the kind of one, who are you going to call, and streamlining some of that process. That's fantastic, because again, when you're in the middle of an incident, and you're going, I don't know, have we done this? Have we done that? Which contractor to think, oh, okay, now we know who to call. We can call this one, we can call this, and having that contacts. So those are some of the things that really jumped out at that, as well as bringing in these minimum standards, that multi-factor authentication. You've got different, all the logs, zero trust, looking at some of that, which is great, and establishing, but those are going to be expensive, but necessary. So,
right.
Sorry, that's kind of a word dump. And if your head is spinning, everyone's head is spinning. And just think, some of this is 60 days, some of this is 90 days, some of this is 120. Like, yeah, it's a fire drill. Let's go.
I thought it was interesting because the first one, I still haven't read the whole thing. It just says to develop a plan to implement zero trust, and I don't even know like how many of these people even know what zero trust is or how to develop the plan to do it. Yeah, so
right. Well, that's okay. That's why we have NIST there. They're gonna talk to NIST, and they're just gonna go. Hi, NIST. We want zero trust. And
could you develop our plan for us?
Yeah, could you, we have somebody who's telling us to develop something, and we need this. So we've had discussions with previous podcasts, and I think we have one coming up about, hey, your company wants to do zero trust. So if you're in the gov space, maybe that one would be a good one to listen to coming up. But so how effective is this? I mean, it's easy enough for the president to just, throw out a big old piece of paper that says, hey, go do this. Like you said, it's going to be hard for everybody to decide on these things. And it's probably going to take more than 60 days to develop a plan, to think about maybe developing a plan to do zero trust. Will anything actually come out of this? I mean, or is this just, and I don't want to get political, but is this just, trying to put another finger in a dam that's got 100 holes?
So looking at it from two aspects. One, a lot of this has been in the works for years. And it cuts across different administrations, and it's something people have been championing. And I always think of Wendy Nather when I think of zero trust, and poor Wendy, like shouting into the hurricane as this, so a lot of the frameworks are already out there. It's just getting everyone to agree and getting everyone into the room. But the best way to do something, if you're not going, and I keep going back to the power of the purse, it's either lawyers are going to sue you into doing something, insurers are going to pull coverage, or you realize as a contractor that, hey, that sweet deal that you've been writing and those services you've been providing, they're going to have to end, or they're going to find another vendor to do it if you don't meet this, or you get a waiver. I mean, there's always the waiver. And that is built into several of the sections. But yeah, with multi-factor authentication, we think, oh, that's so easy. Zero trust. Oh, that's like encryption. Okay. And they do acknowledge that, all right, there is a ramping up period. But yeah. And when you talk about knowing, part of it is knowing what data you have and what data you're touching. At the big level, that's easy. Kind of, maybe. But then when you start breaking it down to the mom and pops who are providing like that scrappy startup that just got on as a subcontractor to a subcontractor, and now they're going to say, hey, you need to make sure you're jumping through these hoops. Yeah. It's going to make it again. It's interesting, but if you want those dollar bills, you got to figure out a way.
Right. So the other thing I found was telling about this is, they're saying within 90 days of this order, Secretary of Homeland Security acting through Director of CISA in consultation with Attorneys General, Director of FBI and GSA, establishing a framework to collaborate on cybersecurity and incident response activities related to cloud technologies. What I'm wondering is, are they not already coordinating and talking about cybersecurity and incident response stuff? And what is FCEB in terms of cloud technology? Are they not already sharing information between all these agencies, or is it really siloed? I mean, I work for a big company and I definitely see the silos here. So is it, I mean, did not we learn during things like September 11th and others about sharing intelligence and information across these things actually makes it better than, just, keeping your cards to your chest and hoping that it doesn't happen to you. And, oh, look, haha, it happened to the FBI. Thank God it wasn't us.
Well, and hopefully you haven't had we're going to call it pleasure of going through a massive incident, such as, let's just hypothetically, amongst friends, say, let's say you had a ransomware incident. And let's just say, hypothetically, it could potentially impact the world's busiest airport at the time, the municipal system or the waterworks and other systems like that, serving much larger area than just the, direct citizens of the city, hypothetically. And, realizing who all you have to be calling and who has certain information. A lot of people don't realize, for example, that the Secret Service might get involved in incident response, because depending on where the FBI is in their workload, caseload, and depending on what systems are impacted, or potentially, do you have to notify the FAA if it's an aviation system that might be impacting the, flights here and there and everywhere? And you don't realize that. And then also you have different budget battles, and not everybody's playing with each other nicely, and certain information can't get shared, doesn't get shared. So seeing that streamlined process, like that pen to paper, saying, yeah, we're already doing some of this, but here's but having that playbook. And so where the executive order does build out and say, hey, you've got to get some common playbooks. That's fantastic. And you're right. And some of it's already going on, but a lot of times getting that trickle down and having it so that the contractors can build out their resiliency is a great step. It's going to be a painful process because you get into stuff like, again, the Secret Service, who years ago said, we don't want to touch cyber. We're better than cyber. We want to be doing all this other stuff. And suddenly going, oh, but maybe. And I kind of joked, is this CISO's moment? Are they finally getting like their seat at the table solidified?
Right. Yeah. 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 I was like, oh, Chris Krebs is missing out. And then I was like, no, he's probably not missing out. He's probably not missing out. He's doing a better job.
Who was going to have the sock game that,
Right.
He left some big fashion shoes to fill.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So, Mr. Betcher, do you have any questions, anything there from an incident response point of view, or, anything that, might be
the biggest problem I have with this is like, okay, in 180 days, you have to implement encryption for data at rest. I mean, I know some organizations that have FedRAMP data separate from their HIPAA data, which is also separate from their PCI data, and they don't even have to have encryption. I mean, really? I thought that was mandatory for all of these standards, and come to find out it's not. And then this executive order says, oh, by the way, since we don't even, for our federal data, we didn't even require encryption. So let's go ahead and require that now. That's just, to me, ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is they might already be doing that, but it might just be, do your due diligence and make sure that you're actually doing that. So there's going to be orgs out there that are like, oh yeah, they're going to start looking at that now. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this, but it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. They're starting to put a bigger deal on that. So we've been skirting by for years. We probably need to put that on our radar and make sure that we're doing that needful thing.
It reminds me of the whole PCI thing where they require you, and this is the credit card companies, to have data, all the credit card data encrypted. But do they themselves have their own data encrypted? I'll leave that to you as an exercise.
Yeah, I would hope Visa and MasterCard and Discover and all those are doing the exact same things that they rail against other companies to do. But yeah,
one would hope.
Yeah.
Or kind of like the insurer who within the last couple of days, depending on when you're listening to this, I believe there's a $40 million ransom of an insurer. So technically they see the worst of the worst. They should be implementing the best practices. And yet, it was going to take too long. They wanted to get the backups up and going. And was it the cobbler's children have no shoes?
Right.
Yep.
right. That's right. Yeah, I think I found it here. So, doink. So
yeah, the CNA. Sorry.
CNA. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's okay. I found it along with the Atlantic Council discussion you were talking about with the write-up and the annotation. So that's in our show notes as well.
Oh, you mean I'm supposed to actually have put stuff in show notes ahead of time to give y'all warning of where my nerdy brain has gone? Oh, that's fascinating.
No, it's all good. We use it as a collaboration tool. So anybody who comes on the show or ourselves, if we're doing like a news thing, I'll pop some notes in there, pop some links. But sometimes when somebody brings something up like the Atlantic Council or whatever, I'll be Googling here in the background to try to find it. And it was fairly easy to find. So I pride myself on my Googling. So I did all right, I think. So Ms. Berlin, do you have any questions or anything? I know we want to get some time on the other story. Do you have anything about the executive order here?
I'm just I am really, really happy about the two-factor auth thing. Right. Just like it is so overlooked with so many things that probably out of all of the things probably made me the happiest.
That's a big one.
Right. But okay. So NIST has gotten rid of they've deprecated the SMS 2FA. Okay, great. But there are going to be a lot of organizations in the government that aren't aware of that. And they're going to want to try to do something similar or, knock, knock, here comes Okta, here, knock, knock, here comes Duo, knock, knock, here comes, all those vendors that are like, no, don't do the MFA stuff. We got something better, which they may, I don't know, but it really depends on the use case, right? So nothing worse than having, requiring MFA, but now you've got 8 different MFA implementations out there and nobody is operating between them. There's no real open standard that everybody supports. They all want you to use their version. Or if they try to do the open source or the interoperable version, then it's missing. So that's the only other issue I see with this EO. It's like, oh yeah, do all these things. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. They're going to do that. There's not going to be any interoperability. Everything's going to be a hodgepodge and a mess. So, the office of CISA or CISA up in the White House needs to say, okay, we need, I hate to pull a 927 event here, but we, have 15 different standards. We need the one to rule them all. And now we have 16 standards, but it would be nice if they could figure out one method by which, all that is working. And I know the JEDI contract is fairly big. It was set up by, by Microsoft with the Azure platform. Could they not use some of that JEDI technology or, part of the JEDI contract to help with things like AAA or find some commonality there across the enterprise, federal government being the enterprise that they could use to leverage that?
Well, and they do acknowledge that there are those multiple standards but also recognizing that one to rule them all really won't fit with every use case. So right. Again, if you're thinking of what are we really talking about here? Are we talking about a state, local government or local contractor who they just need some sort of, backup, I'll take it, versus, oh no, you're carrying you're working on the codes for this or the data for this, like there is no failure in your realm and doing that. But I think that, and only because I'm chomping at the bit, and I'm sure y'all are too. So creating best practices, I mean, if you read a certain op-ed in The Hill or opinion piece this past week, it talked about, but for following best practices, we wouldn't have any of these breaches. So really, I think this executive order is just going to lead to so many more breaches under this logic, because It's saying, hey, cybersecurity is important and we need to finally suck it up and start getting uniform best practices.
Right. Interesting segue there. Yes. So to give a little background, because this will be around in the future, a person by the name of Alan Gwynn, who was the opinion contributor, and currently in 2021, this person is the professor of practice in information technology at the Cox School of Business at SMU, which is, I believe, Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Yep. With over 4 decades of experience with systems, networks, data, and other cyber resources. Now,
do you mean he's already tenured? That's why.
Exactly.
That's what I said. Yeah, he's tenured. Yeah.
And I will point out that up until now, until reading this opinion piece, I'd never heard his name. I didn't know that SMU even had a program. And, all these different things. So I'm not saying someone stirred stuff up to perhaps draw attention to things, but I'll just sit here and sip my tea since we're talking about Southern universities and shade.
Well, it's the best kept secret in cybersecurity is Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas.
I just keep on hoping it's just an elaborate prank that somebody was able to get something published like that, and it's not even a real person. Somehow the university is made up.
No, Southern Methodist exists. Yeah. No, so I think what happened is this is The Hill, which is technically supposed to be like a news news site. It didn't make it into like, Hacker News or whatever, other than, as a way of people making fun or to kick this dude in the teeth. There's actually an editor's note. He made some comments post article talking about this. So he says, the hacking at Colonial Pipeline is the latest in a series of breaches that have impacted a long and growing list of other businesses, all ambushed by some individual or group that managed to hack through cybersecurity industry best practices. And he uses this as in quotey fingers, like, industry's best practices. So I read this after everybody had already, made light of his ignorance. And I ask myself, and I want to try to step onto the other side where he's at. And please send all your hate mail to Miss Berlin because she likes it. Anyway, my thought was their industry best practices that obviously Colonial Pipeline, we assume that Colonial Pipeline knew what the industry best practices was and yet decided to not do them. So that's the understanding here, is that obviously they got breached because they didn't implement these things. One, did they actually know what those industry best practices were? And would those best practices have actually protected them from this attack? And in the same breath that we tell people to implement industry best practices, the caveat is it won't stop a determined attacker.
Sorry, gesturing wildly because but that's not the point.
Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me.
Right.
Please don't hurt me.
It's
Oh my God. Which when I said that, she reacted the same way my wife does when I forgot to turn on the dishwasher. And I'm like, oh, please, God, please.
No, I'm hoping the mic is almost picking up my dog's snores and snorts in the background, because I'm just like, yes, Mr. Chance Pants, totally agree. Because it's kind of like when vendors sell stuff that says, we're going to stop all cyber attacks, and you're going, is that the goal, or is it just to make it harder? Because I don't know.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the person goes on, says industry best practices, for example, dictate that network administrators should be boxed in administratively. They should not be able to see what is happening on workstations. Okay, so some of his writing here, and obviously he makes light of CISSP and CISA, which real hackers, and I'm using quotey fingers, don't have those, or like myself, I have the CISP. I worry that he spent 35 of his 40 years in academia and does not actually understand some of the best practices that are out here. I think that there's probably a narrow focus in what he's considering. And there's been several people who've mentioned that he's actually teaching people who are going to be going out into information security world. And this is the opinion that he's giving them. And I'm sure he's telling people in his classroom, look how mean all these people were to me. I
think it's worse. I think he's going out there teaching people who will manage the security people, right?
Right.
They'll be making decisions on what the best security best practices should be.
Isn't that how like academia just works, like across the board? Not everywhere, obviously, but you always have the person
theoretical and not the practical.
Yeah. You have the person that's been in academia for almost their entire career, and they're teaching outdated stuff, and they don't. Most of the time, I imagine they don't know any better. And then people get to the real world and they're like, oh, that's how it's done.
Well, he says that ambushed by some individual group that managed to hack through cybersecurity industry best practices. Now, how does he know that Colonial Pipeline instituted industry best practices, first of all? And secondly, I don't think the details of the breach have been disclosed yet.
No.
So we really don't know, even though he believes he knows. I first read this and I thought, okay, this is satire, really.
Yeah.
Nobody can think this.
It started with a dog turd rolling down the hill, and then it gathered more turds as it went down, because he doubles down by saying, what can a business or industry do right now? And one of the first things he says is implement a one strike and you're out hiring policy for information security employees. Now, for those of you who've been listening and whether or not you follow information security, there is a quote unquote lack of good information security talent in the world. Now, I argue that it's a failure of companies to write proper job descriptions to be able to hire those folks. But firing and not hiring people who have been at a company that has dealt with incident responses seems not good.
I bet you everybody has had an incident, whether they know it or not, is the problem.
Yeah. Right. So you're not hiring the people who have dealt with incidents and have that experience, and you are hiring the people who claim that they have never been involved in an incident, which could be could be a lot worse, because they would be the ones that didn't even know that their company was probably owned 6 ways from Sunday.
Right? Yes.
Right.
Yes. Like applaud 100 times over, because the folks who've been there, done that, have learned from it. You would assume, hope, etc. Have that muscle memory of saying, all right, these are the things we spotted the first time, but also recognizing, not to pick on a certain municipality, but they had just received their insurance coverage for cyber risk. Policy checked all the boxes. So if what we're saying is that, oh, well, surely if you've checked all the boxes, nothing would happen. Yeah, no, I can tell you a $20 million and counting payout that doesn't. But at the same time, some of those, it did provide an opportunity to identify the holes in the system and then build a better system. So getting rid of those people with that institutional knowledge is like just malarkey shenanigans.
Right. I did agree with one thing in his article, and it says, instead of impressively credentialed, paper savvy information security professionals, like people who may have gotten degrees from Southern Methodist University, hire competent, technically skilled professionals, encourage collaboration with other technically skilled professionals, and give them the tools and access to protect your firm's cyber resources. I do agree with that. I don't have any problems with that. Hiring talented people is not easy. And, it's not made easier by HR people and by people who have ignorant job descriptions. Our talent pool could be overflowing if we just knew exactly what we wanted to hire for and not looking for unicorns.
Plus there's scythe unicorns, in which case always look for scythe unicorns.
Scythe unicorns, right. Or blue hedgehogs, like what Miss Berlin has there, Blue Mira. So
exactly.
The other thing he does not give a solution. He's like, security approaches that existed before industry best practices really do work. What are those?
The days of Configure, where basically there were no best practices, and therefore one little virus could basically take over every system on your network.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
He said, go ahead.
I was going to say, or, perhaps you didn't read The Cuckoo's Egg, and talking about going back to the 1980s when you had breaches and incidents going on that, if we're being crippled by a reliance on these best practices as the end all be all, well, okay, then surely we didn't have any breaches before these best practices, which is, I think, one of the points he tried to say is, it's only been lately it's going, okay, or you're teaching students without a fundamental understanding of where the industry has come from. So, wow, okay.
Yeah, some of his terminology in here is fairly dated. What did he say? He said, let the administrators have access to the server clusters. And I'm like, what the hell is a server cluster?
So basically get away with least privilege. Right. What he's talking about.
Right. Yeah. Grant network engineers administrative access to the server cluster. Grant developers access such that network or workstation anomalies can be fully investigated. I don't know a developer that actually investigates workstation or network anomalies.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not
What,
their
what the hell
job.
does that mean? Right. Yeah. So yeah, he doubles down. He says the editor's note, he's like, the author, Professor Gwynn, and states that his column included what is likely to have been the worst wording I ever used in my life, suggesting he favored the willy-nilly firing of whole staff of people after a security incident. My intent was to hold leadership accountable. He now states that businesses and industries should implement a one strike and you're out hiring policy for information security leadership. So fire the leaders whose job it is to secure systems and networks after a major expensive breach. Rotate leadership and do not let it happen twice. Also weed out and avoid hiring former information security leaders. So get rid of the people that have actually been there, done that, like we've talked before, including, people like Alex Stamos, for instance. Alex Stamos is damaged goods. So, get rid of him. He's damaged goods, lady. No Alex Stamos, no, CSO Andy, all of these people that have been working at big organizations that have had to deal with incident responses, get rid of them. I've dealt with half a dozen just in the 3 months that I've been working where I'm at.
I can understand writing an article that's provocative. Great. You take a risk and you own that risk and you want to have the conversations, right? And to, throw a grenade over the wall and see what happens. But I think he went a little too far, stepped out of his comfort zone and wrote an article about something that he really doesn't know much about at all. And it's scary that he's training the next round of leaders in companies, right? Because he's a business professor. So he's teaching the future CEOs of companies and telling them that best practices is not the way to go when it comes to at least information security. So who are they going to hire? Who are these new CEOs going to hire? Well, probably they're going to let their CIO be the CISO, or maybe a developer be the CISO, right? Because they probably know more about, what's going on in the organization and the application that they have to build. And it's not a recipe for success, in my opinion.
Well, the developers are already, on the workstations trying to find all these anomalies. So they might as well be CISOs now too.
Yeah.
Right, well, and if they're following the executive orders breakdown, they're also capturing lots of logs and doing all kinds of other stuff. So really, I think this is just advocating to build out the program because at SMU and others, because there's obviously he's just trying to job security for his students, because if the recent graduates have never had a job, then they obviously couldn't have been involved in an incident. If you have been involved in an incident, then he's recommending you get hired. And especially if you don't know the best practices to follow, because the best practices are the breach. So I think it's a brilliant marketing plan that probably the freshman marketing class at SMU came up with. Right.
Yep. Yeah, his apology, which we do have a link to a tweet there where he had posted up, I believe the article looks like it might have come from LinkedIn. He deleted his Twitter account. He's like, I've obviously heard the feedback on my article. I know there are some who are deeply offended by my broad-based characterization of the InfoSec industry. I will also cede that I know many engineers in the field who I respect deeply. So, I'm sorry. I have InfoSec friend. I know people in the InfoSecs that I have friends in there. You probably don't anymore. I will tell you right now, I regret how I worded the sentence, never hire an InfoSec engineer employee who's never worked for a firm that's had an incident. I recognize that people get blamed for other people's mistakes, and those are not who I was intending to target with my comment. I do stand by my bottom line that the security industry needs a real renaissance, and I've heard from many of you. I apologize for who I offended. I, on the other hand, should never write an editorial smiley face. If I do, someone please hack in, empty my bank account, and forward the proceeds to Buy Everyone a Beer Foundation. I think he missed the mark. I don't think he really understands why he should not be, or she be apologizing. He's killing pretty much 80% of the workforce in InfoSec if you do things like not hire anybody who's worked for a firm that has had a security incident. Don't ever write again, Professor Alan Gwynn, because it's not helpful. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many things wrong with this, and I love the rebuttal. We're kind of a little short on time here, but thank you to Noid on Twitter. Somebody had posted up a balanced response to this, and I know Liz is probably going to talk about it in an upcoming blog post, which we'll make sure we retweet and add to this. Because she said, "Oh yes, I have thoughts," and when I saw that, I was like, "We're going to talk about it." Yeah, so. Yeah, there's so many bad takes on that, and implementing best practices is not easy. If they were, everybody would be doing it. It's something that we definitely should strive for. We got into it on our Slack channel quite a bit about what are industry best practices. Well, are they born out of things like compliance frameworks, or and then we got to talking about, well, are compliance frameworks actually best practices? And we're like, no. Have you seen FedRAMP? Have you seen PCI? Those are not necessarily best practices. CIS benchmarks, for instance, hardening guides. When I was in the government and the Navy, we dealt with things like DISA gold discs, which are great for industry best practices. You can implement all the things on the DISA gold disk, but if you reboot your, Active Directory server at the time, you'll brick your server. So, implementing best practices, maybe it should be being mindful about best practices. Some things just don't make sense to put in, kind of like our discussion earlier with 2FA. They don't always work for every scenario, some of those things. And that's why you have to have things like exception practices and, audit policies that go, yeah, we can't implement this because it'll brick these systems. And, the level of effort to implement versus the impact and the need to implement this thing doesn't make any sense. You can't blindly just implement best practices. I mean, about the only one I would think that is pretty much universally okay would be logging. But even then, like what Ms. Berlin knows, you don't just want to log all the things. Everything has a caveat to it. Well, enabling debug logs is not always a good thing. There are caveats, in an application, or
take down your server because of IOP issues.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, everything has, when you're implementing best practices, doing it recklessly is probably as bad as not implementing them at all. And Elizabeth, I know you've got thoughts about this. When you're talking to companies, and I'm sure you've had to deal with some incident responses yourself, what are some of the questions you ask them? Did you implement these best practices, or is it like, what kind of controls did you have in place at the beginning? I mean,
and it's really, you ask because you want to get a sense of, but you have to be careful who you're asking and what exactly, because again, kind of going back to the other example, if you ask one person within the company because of their like, oh yeah, sure, we have this, we have that, and talk about with PCI compliance, then say an airport turns off its free Wi-Fi because hypothetically it's under the city that network segmentation, thank goodness. But you suddenly have retailers coming in and saying, hey, we noticed the free Wi-Fi's turned off. We were running it for some of our like point of sale stuff. Could you turn it back on? And if those conversations were to occur, there may have been a redheaded lawyer who at that point fell out of her chair, like just like having an absolute fit going, did you really just say that? And okay, but let's, that level setting, now we know where we are on certain things, but you wouldn't have gotten that through different things. So it kind of goes back to, there's in theory, there's in practice, and then there's the boots on the ground who's actually having to deal with stuff. And good luck, like figuring out where you actually in reality are and where you think you are.
Yep. That's spot on. So, I want to talk to you so much about so much, including things like paying ransomware and stuff. I mean, it's pretty much a daily occurrence now where people are paying it or not paying it. We can definitely have you on again in the future.
Spoiler alert. Yes.
It goes without saying.
Yes.
It goes without saying. I mean,
I'm sorry. I'll play hard to get. What? I mean, sure. I mean, y'all
Like, how
can
much
talk
does
me
it
into
pay?
thoughts.
We'll pay you a retainer and then, just have you come in whenever. Yeah. That is the best way to go. Yeah. Retainer. We'll just put you on a retainer model and then
Yes.
you can just invoice us for work done or what have you. So
I'm bribed
so
easily with cookies, other sweets, wine, anything like that.
very all right. I actually know a local, a black-owned business up here, Seattle Cookie Company, Pinkney's Cookies. It does a
They're
real
so good.
hell yeah.
Oh, they're so good.
I love
I
it so
need a
much.
cookie.
Cookie. Yeah. But all right. So we need to go because everybody's got to go do things that may not or may not be necessarily work related. Liz, how would people find you on Twitter or elsewhere? Your blog. If they wanted to talk to you about stuff.
Yeah. So at Lawyer Liz on Twitter, the blogs that I post, the writings these days are through Scythe. So scythe.io, and go to our blog page, and then LinkedIn, Elizabeth Wharton. Happy to chat. And also, if folks have ideas, if I'm wrong, or if I haven't looked at something, please share. I'm only as smart as the people around me. So.
Yep. Yes.
So, and thanks for letting me come in and share and rant and rave and participate in the fun discussion.
I'm so happy you were able to take the time to do that and come in. So it's very much appreciated. And yeah, we definitely want to have you on again in the near future. Mr. Betcher had to go go get his kids. So he is on Twitter at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. You can check out Log-MD, which is logging and digital forensics and tool that you can use to get logs on your Windows boxes if you need them, along with some other things that he's working on. So you can go check that out. Miss Berlin, awesome artwork recently on Facebook and stuff. That hand was really nice. It's like, and you were like, oh, good hand, but it's missing a finger. So yeah, it was. Yeah,
Did you see my updated one? Did you see the updated one with the?
I did not.
No, there's another one.
Okay.
It's kind of like if at an SMU football game, it would be telling them who's number one.
Yes.
Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be. Oh my goodness. Worst foam finger ever. Yeah.
But the best drawing of one ever.
Yes. Right. 100%. Yeah. Miss Berlin, tell everybody about what you do with Hackers Health and all those.
So you can find me at Hackers Health if you want to know more about that, because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we've been doing some cool things with that. We just recently did the whole Hackers Who Paint, which was crazy fun. And we'll probably do that again. And it looks like we're shaping up to maybe have a suite at DEF CON.
Oh.
I had a conversation with a very large company today that is willing to sponsor it, which that'll be interesting with my current employer, but everything will be fine. And yeah, you can find me personally at InfoSister on Twitter. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. All right. So I've got to get on the horn with some of my nonprofit-y folks and, get our Eventbrite for InfoSec Campout set up along with our Patreon. I was going to query Miss Berlin because, since her awesome drawing, I thought maybe she could draw us a nice logo or something we could put on a t-shirt, not a middle finger, but, something similar, maybe. I don't know.
All right. I'll just hide the middle finger in there somewhere.
There you go.
Yeah. It's like a tree or something. And
well, you got to, it's like those 3D pictures when you're when you were younger, you got to put your eyes just so, and it's like, it turns into a middle finger. Yeah. We could do something we could definitely do something like that. But you can follow the show at BreakSec on Twitter, BRAKESEC, and I'm Brian Break on Twitter. You can also our nonprofit, which is helping out a lot of folks, including one called Black Girls Hack. awesome organization trying to help underrepresented folks get exposure. So I'm hoping to get the organizer of that on in the next few weeks here to talk about what they do and how people can help. It's a nonprofit, so you can go and donate money and time. And if you're a recruiter, reach out to Black Girls Hack on Twitter and find people some jobs, man, because everybody's looking for jobs.
How did you know that I will be one of the guests in one of their coffee chat this coming weekend, sharing about different career paths in cybersecurity? So fantastic. I completely echo that sentiment. Look up the organization. They welcome volunteers to help share and connect. And it's worth a couple hours of my time and hopefully inspiring some of their members and attendees that lawyers aren't as like fun suckers as everyone makes us out to be.
Lawyers are people too.
We really are.
Most of them
really are.
Yeah. Some of them are not.
But sorry, I just got excited. So I was like, yes, that organization. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. She let me join their Slack, and they have a job board. They do lab nights where you can go and learn things. They're doing lab setups with a lot of people to make sure they can do things like under wire or do hack the box. They involve themselves in CTFs as well, and they also do some free trainings and stuff online there. So if you're an underrepresented group, go check out Black Girls Hack, and there's a lot of other organizations that they're involved with as well. I think they actually have a paid Slack. They have stuff on their Slack that I don't have on mine. So that's awesome, because I sure as heck can't afford that right now. So we do have our Slack as well. We have a lot of good discussion, including the Colonial Pipeline stuff and that gentleman who wrote the Hill article. If you're interested in getting on that, you can send us a DM to BreakSec or email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. That's our tip jar to help offset operating costs and just the cost of maintaining our awesome community. Thank you to all of our moderators in the Slack as well for maintaining a sane BreakSec Slack there. And TPub, we're going to have the whatever t-shirt for our logo for that. We also have paraphernalia on there. They're still selling masks, I think, as well as t-shirts, mugs, and whatever. And that gives us a little kickback as well if you'd like to help support the show in that method. All those links are in show notes on our Libsyn site at breakingsecurity.com. So, all right, that's it. I have a meeting that I'm 10 minutes late for, and sounds like it's a perfect time because the lawn people just showed up. So hope everybody has a great week. Miss Berlin, I will see you in a couple days for yet another show. We're getting real busy. We're trying to set up our buffer for when people are gone for the holidays and stuff. So we're trying to get a little ahead here. But Liz, thank you so much for coming. We'll definitely reach out again. I want to talk about ransomware and other things as well. So we definitely want to get you on to talk about some of those items. And everyone out there, take care of yourselves. If you have the opportunity to get vaccinated, please do so. Continue to wear a mask if you don't feel like whatever your risk is, feel like you need to, keep wearing those and taking care of yourselves, because that's, you're the only you have. So we'll talk to you again soon.